Welcome to the No Name MMA show, April 16th, 2020.
15th.
I don't even know, man. This quarantine's fucking me up. My name's Andy Romero,
I'm Nina Hager.
Juan Chavez.
and we're just gonna be jumping right into it. Just to mention right off the bat, as of the recording for the second episode, we were going into it in full belief that that was gonna happen. Turns
Card
out,
249.
yeah. So it turns out we were all suckers, and right after we had gotten done, it UFC 249 had gotten indefinitely exposed because of the COVID-19 virus. Uh, that's where right now it looks like it's still going to go on. It's going to get moved to May 9th. Who knows where it's going to take place, but they kind of reshuffled the cards and we have a whole new card, sort of. And yeah, bigger, badder card.
When do you think they're gonna announce the place for it? I don't think they're
I don't
gonna.
think they're ever gonna announce it.
I
Just like I mean, they didn't. Dana White didn't directly reference Tachi Palace Hotel or Casino Resort, whatever the fuck it is, up until he had said, "Oh yeah, we were getting canceled and they had our back." Up until then, there was no confirmation for it. Right now, it's looking like a battle between Texas and Florida, just because Florida's just like, bring it on. Like we don't give a fuck about COVID-19. I mean,
but I think once it gets announced, that's when people who are in higher places or just in general, I think once they're like, okay, we can't really do anything about it because they're just talking about it. But once we have a location about it, then we can do something about it. So we're just gonna sit back and say nothing to them, let them believe that they're gonna do it, and then once it gets to the point to where they come, we're gonna snatch it right from under them. Now, if that is the case, I think that they need to wait before the Thursday before weigh-ins, and I think the fighters who accept being on this card needs to go in with the mindset of being aware that that might just be the case, and I need to be okay with that. I need to be okay with not flying to where I need to go weigh in until the night or the day before
Yeah.
of.
And they're clearly not worried about selling tickets right now. It's really just making these fights happen. But we were talking earlier this week too, and I know everybody is upset with this indefinitely uh, just lingering dates, but that's kind of the world we live in for every single aspect of our lives right now. So it makes sense that finally the real world is catching up with the UFC schedule.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. What else is like in the news and headlines of our exciting MMA world, boys?
GSP, he just got done with an interview with what's his name? I believe his name is Alex. Is it? I'm not entirely sure. Um, but he just got done with an interview from him. Some key points that I want to point out really is the biggest part is the GSP versus Khabib that everybody wanted. Um, but the UFC seemed to think that nobody wanted, which I was highly confused about because every person I've ever talked to about that said that they wanted it. So the UFC apparently did not want that to go down just because if GSP George St. Pierre, who had retired as champion, being the only person to do that, the UFC did not want that fight to happen because if GSP won the fight, would he leave the title vacant again? Or would he continue fighting when he didn't want to do that in the first place?
Yeah.
Um, so it came down to GSP wanting it to be a kind of a fan fight. He didn't want it to be for the title, and the UFC was just like, "There's no money in that."
Yeah.
I mean, that's true. It's kind of unfair. Even though GSP has a very good argument for being the GOAT, like you can't just pop in, show up, get the belt, and then dip out just like you did with Michael Bisping.
No, I get that, but why does it have like why can't it be not a main event? It doesn't have to be a main event. If Khabib wants it for his leg,
GSP and non a main event.
Khabib not a main
Yeah.
event.
oh, but that being said, they don't want it for the champ. They don't want it. They don't want it for the money. They don't want it for anything. Them two themselves literally just want to fight each other for the legacy of it. So if they're so,
but they want to get paid, right?
yes, they want to get paid.
So then what the fuck?
Listen to
Then
me.
just go to your
Listen to me.
fucking neighborhood fucking alley.
Linda, listen,
So-
honey.
So if obviously they're still gonna get paid a lot of money, especially if they're on there with another big name. So why not make them a co-main event? Have the main event something that is also big. Not only would the UFC be bringing home a lot more money, but the fighters themselves would bring a lot more money just because that many more people are paying to see them fight.
GSP, come on the show. Explain this to us.
Oh, for sure.
Khabib, come on the show.
Come on the show.
So
let us know.
my only gripe with that is that as shitty as this might sound, Khabib without the belt is not that interesting of a fight for GSP. I think at that point he would more angle it to fighting Conor McGregor. As much as he says that he wants to do it for legacy,
Khabib 4 fights ago, I give you that. Khabib with his name being as big as it is now, I disagree with that. I think just like there's people who want to see Kobe Covington lose, I think there's people who want to see Khabib lose, and I think they're gonna pay just as much to see, even though Khabib is not a trash talker.
So what's the biggest draw here? GSP coming back to fight Khabib, or Khabib the champion fighting GSP?
I'll give you the fact that Khabib non-championship fight is not the same as Khabib championship fight. So I'll meet you halfway and saying Khabib non-championship fight against GSP is just as big as a draw as GSP coming back just to fight one fight in general.
When Dana White had mentioned the whole UFC 249 postponement, he had also spoken with Brett Okamoto about saying that the Fight Island, this mythical like Mortal Kombat island, is still being built and it should be built in a month from now. So that's where I think a lot of the fights are going to be taking place, especially. So it's going to be a mix between there again and the UFC Apex, which is in Nevada.
Are they only? He says he's only doing international fights. Does that mean like people who's not from America? Like, so
everyone, that's where they'll go fight.
Everyone from America is still just going to fight in America, but everyone outside of America.
Mm-hmm. Just to make it easier, just because a lot of people, I think it'll be easier for them to fly to an island versus flying into America.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the reason those two places are even the only options for venues would be because of tribal lands and international waters. So that's where he can kind of slide under some jurisdiction.
Yeah.
I wish Cuba would open up for UFC. That'd be dope.
That'd be fucking crazy.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
Mm-hmm. Fucking imagine Yoel Romero in Cuba. I would not. Oh my god.
I want to go now just for that.
Yoel Romero, come on the show.
Yeah.
Yes, please, Dad.
Yoel Romero, take me to Cuba.
Okay, that's enough of that. Another news. So it looks like the beef between John Jones and Israel Adesanya, seems to keep on going over and over.
Israel started it this time. John Jones did not have Israel's name in his mouth at all.
That's true. And then John Jones kind of used the same old trope of him getting knocked out however many years ago. And then Israel Adesanya went in the paint. He was just like, hey, this is how your kids are going to recite the alphabet after they come home from quarantine. And it showed the body cam footage of John Jones going through his DUI. I
will say John Jones needs to be careful with the way that he talks and what he says to Israel Adesanya. Because Israel Adesanya is his in the Octagon record as well as his outside the Octagon record. Like, you can't really talk smack about it. He has one knockout.
That's where, it's just the one knockout versus all the countless bullshit things you've done, which we won't go over again because we've gone over in the past couple episodes. But like, you have so many skeletons in your closet that it's just like, oh yeah, you got a DUI. Oh yeah, you've got fucking pop for PEDs. Oh yeah, you ran over a pregnant chick and ran away. Oh yeah, this and that. It's just like that's a battle you're gonna lose. This isn't a fight. This is a trolling competition. and I promise you, Izzy's gonna win this.
And I like that Izzy is kind of using John Jones's own words to smack talk.
Oh yeah.
So
Whenever he was just like, "Go ahead, babe."
yeah, so him calling out John Jones saying he's still there, pussy, which was the not so incognito call out that Jones did to DC
Yeah.
when he thought the mics were off. It's just very poetic justice, I feel like. So I like Izzy anyway, so I'm rooting for his trash talking in this just
I really like his personality. He has a really
Yeah.
good personality.
Oh, yeah.
I feel bad for champions because not necessarily bad. I just feel bad pulling for a champion because not only am I pulling for a champion, but there's another fighter who I want to become champion.
Yeah.
Like Tony Ferguson could be type thing.
That's where when you were saying just a minute ago that some people just want to see Khabib beat. Like I am that person who is ready just to see champions go down too.
Yeah.
In other news, there was something that we had mentioned before in the last podcast where we had talked about Rose Namajuanis withdrawing from UFC 249. We just wanted to make a quick mention. Before it was undisclosed why she had pulled out. Shortly after that, it was said that she withdrew because she had 2 family members that had passed away because of COVID-19. Thoughts and prayers go out to her and her family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Moving on from that, there was a couple of fights pre the indefinite postponement that were announced. One of those is Alistair Overeem, who's ranked number 8 in heavyweight, against Walt Harris. Alistair Overeem, his last fight was the knockout, which I don't think it was a knockout, by Jairzinho Rosenstrike late in the 5th. Walt Harris, this is going to be his first fight back from his daughter getting kidnapped and murdered. That happened only a couple months ago. So
that is so insane too.
Yeah.
To be able to come back and fight for that's. I wonder if he's fighting because he has to. Like at this point, like he's taken the amount of time that he's been able to take care of himself.
Yeah.
Or if he's doing this to get whatever emotions out. Because if he's doing it to get emotions out,
that could be a slippery slope, man. That's how you end up just fucking up. Because all you need is just that little fuck up. In heavyweights, the margin for error is just that much smaller, man. All you need is just one of those big ass paws hitting your face and lights out. So
especially if it's Francis or something, this might be the downfall for him. But I'd
respect.
understand.
Yeah,
I'd understand. It's crazy.
Just the drive and the motivation that.
But if he wins and he destroys this guy, dude, it makes sense. And all the.
In line with Tony Ferguson news, this motherfucker still plans on weighing in on Friday.
He told Gagey to make sure you're gonna make weight, and Gagey was like, "Ha, I took you on 20 some whatever day notice, and nah, I'm not making weight."
No, that's fucking fair. Like right after the postponement announcement, this motherfucker had ice cream cones and shit in his Instagram story. He was all over it, just ready to go.
Justin was not having it, which I mean. Honestly, like I said, I think Tony's doing that so that if any surprise dates come out, Tony is always ready. I think he's cutting weight. I don't think he's training, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's fair.
He's just constantly rolling.
And Dustin Poirier, he donated, 1,000 pizzas or something to a bunch of
hospital staff, I think.
Yeah. Which was really nice. I wonder how much that cost them.
Well, he does have his organization. If anybody's interested in donating, his group is called thegoodfightgroup.com. You can go there and donate. He was saying that he was going to do something for the local area hospitals in Lafayette, Louisiana, and he showed up and paid for meals, and he also made meals. And he was making 1,000 pizzas for the staff and crew at the hospital.
Yeah, for Easter,
Yeah,
which was so
yeah,
nice.
it was on Easter Sunday.
Yeah, it's so good to see stuff like that too, especially with everything else that we're hearing the people going through.
Yeah, and it's great to know that he's in the position to help and that he is doing. Shortly after this, there was also a post by Izzy that he said that he was also donating to his local hospitals and stuff, masks and different supplies that they might need.
That's so awesome.
So yeah.
Did Conor McGregor do anything? He's like the richest man in UFC. Like he should be kind of pushing some stuff up. But
you spoke too soon. So he did donate €1 million worth of supplies and all kinds of shit to his hospitals.
That's what I'm talking about.
So,
all right, that's what I'm talking about.
But then Conor McGregor, and it's just like Conor McGregor showed up with $1 million. I was like, oh shit.
Conor McGregor, if he would also like to make a donation to the No Name MMA show, we will accept that. Come on the show.
Come on the show. I would love to have you. Have some things I want to pick your brain about. The heavyweight Rosenstrike, he mentioned in an interview that the possibility of an interim belt should come into play due to Stipe not fighting because he's focused on helping the people in coronavirus. He's not training to fight. He's not going to fight at any point. His whole mindset right now is being focused on being a first responder, which I get, but like you signed up for a job, which
that's where I'm on the fence about it. And if people who know me know that I'm the biggest DC fan, and this opinion is not granted with that. It's just that you like if you're gonna have an interim fight, then some time does have to pass. It has to be at least a year. You can't just strip somebody of a belt when they haven't lost. Yeah, they're not fighting, but like you gave Robert Whittaker a year. So maybe let that time pass, and then once the time comes back around, then we can have the conversation about an interim championship fight.
But Stipe has came out and said, "Yo, I'm not fighting. I'm gonna focus on this job, and I'm not gonna focus on this job." Sorry. Which, I mean, I get it. I get his heart is in the right place. Totally 100% understand. But if that's the case, then the company needs to have a backup plan for when a champion is vacant of his current career.
That's fair too, but I think you still need to observe the period of time. I think once a year has passed, that's too long, and then you strip, and then you do the interim, and then you figure it out. Up until then, you can be like, I'm doing coke with everybody, I'm doing this and that and the other. But if it's that period of time that it's still falling into, after that, then you can start making the decision of.
But you're throwing strip into this. No one's asking for him to become strip. What someone's asking for is for them to create an interim championship so that there's not a question of who's next in line.
To unify it?
No,
so like Stipe would remain champ and then the interim.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be fair too, but there's still so much time between now and then that if I were Stipe and I was going to get paid more money to fight DC later on versus less money for a more dangerous fighter, I'm going to go with DC because at least I know I've beat him.
That's fair.
Where he's beat Ngannou, but Ngannou's still a scary fucking man.
All right, but
Francis
that being said,
Ngannou,
DC...
come on the show. We see you peeking our Instagram stories, so
I appreciate that. That was surprising. But that being said, DC was wrecking Stipe up until that fourth round, and then that fourth round. So DC, going up against DC, he has something. He has
but more money
to lose.
So if you look at it as an even threat, and you get more money off of one, which one are you picking? More money. Money talks, baby. Money bags, I just don't know
how much more money he'd be getting.
A lot more money. A lot more money.
Well,
that's a trilogy fight. And he already
I haven't seen anybody else ask for it.
Well, they're fucking losers.
Well, DC might be next in line to replace Mr. Dana White himself. Did you guys see
I did
that
not see that.
editorial?
I did not.
Yeah.
So he was speaking with Ariel Helwani right now during quarantine. He's been having regular shows on Mondays with Ariel, and
Ariel, come on the show.
Yeah, Ariel, come on the show. And Ariel was kind of throwing around some of the rumors that were going around, like, hey, would you be interested in being the UFC president? And DC was just like, hey, I would be an expletive idiot if I didn't accept that. Like, who in their right mind says no to that? But also, he mentioned that Dana White was also, going to be there for a while. He has already re-signed to be a president up until 2026. So even then, it would be some time unless he got outed by Endeavor, who is the group that owns the UFC. Bloody Elbow had an editorial post where they had said maybe because of the UFC 249 debacle, it kind of shows that Dana White might be ready to go. He might should be replaced. Maybe look at somebody else to kind of take over the reins.
I don't think they're giving him enough credit. I think, from my perspective, I see it as the situation in which Dana White he's doing the best he can with the amount of limitations he's able to stretch.
It's completely unprecedented for everything in the world right now. So the big debacle, meaning what exactly?
So for me, like, I see where they're coming from. I feel like you could have easily just pushed it to May from the get-go, or maybe postponed it 2 months and kept Tony versus Khabib. Because Khabib has to go through Ramadan, so once he goes into Ramadan, he's fasting and everything, so he's going to be in no fighting condition. But if you would have just postponed it, you might have saved some face, kind of figured it all out instead of kind of doing this all last minute, trying to figure it out.
How come they're not going back to it? How come they're not just sitting down and be like, all right, we've already lost it. We know it's not going to happen on that date. We already had. I see what they're trying to do as far as making a card for a big card, but at this point, if they know that it's not happening at the date that they wanted it to, why are they not bringing Khabib back?
That's what I'm saying. It's just one of those things where it looks more. Like, I appreciate the effort that's getting put in, but from a perspective of like maybe he is fucking up, maybe it would be just a better like saving face of just being like, hey, you know what, we can't. Let's just postpone it just a little bit to May 9th, keep Khabib, and then move forward with it. Because in all honesty, Tony versus Justin Gaethje is a great fight, and it's gonna be a fucking bloodbath, and it's gonna be amazing. But I wanted Tony versus Khabib. I think everybody wanted Tony versus Khabib. And that's where maybe that kind of exposes some of the chinks in the armor of you're not just this sultan of everything that can make anything happen at any given point.
Yeah.
Maybe you just got to take one in the chin, take the L, and just kind of move on.
And honestly, I would be shocked if anything's up and running again early May. That's only 3 weeks away.
Yeah,
So even May 9th as a date is going to be way too soon. So then you're going to run into that road bump all over again.
This doesn't really refer to UFC or MMA, but just in general. I was reading somewhere on Twitter or something, and the NC senator, now granted this is social media, so I don't know how true this is, but the NC senator wants to open everything back up in North Carolina within the month of May, which that just doesn't seem feasible to me. So
Governor Cooper won't let that happen. I don't think either.
I mean, yeah, he just started. So we're based in North Carolina. For anybody that's not listening from the state, our governor just released the rules of limiting people going into like the Harris Teeter, Food Lines, and things like that,
which are grocery stores.
Yeah, so those are things that just happened recently. So it's instead of getting more lax, it's getting more tight. A lot of people are considering like maybe at the end of this month, maybe start working some things out where we can reopen some things. But
I think everything needs to get
but
shut down.
but
I think
who knows?
people don't know how math works and multiplication
I mean, that's
and
where you
stuff
can
like
kind of
that.
make the argument of like maybe social distancing did do a good enough job, but where if you look at the people that are gonna get COVID and they survive and they're just asymptomatic, maybe you just kind of quarantine the people that are more likely to get like serious health issues because of it.
I'm just saying, Mother Nature is not getting rid of natural selection, no matter how bad we try.
I
This
mean,
is
some of
true.
those old races are dying, so
Yeah.
That's fair.
yeah.
I take it.
Okay, so we had somebody mention to us, our friend John. He wanted to know a little bit more about Fedor Emelianenko, why he never got to fight in the UFC. So Fedor is one of the scariest heavyweight champions or fighters at this point. He was going through a streak where he had gone, I don't know how many fights in a row, but he had, wins over Mirko Krokop and former champ Andrei Orlovsky. At that point, it was kind of set in stone that he was going to make the move to UFC to fight Brock Lesnar. What ended up happening is Fedor is one of the nicest people in the UFC, but his manager was kind of the one that ruined it for him. They were asking too much of the UFC at that point to make that Brock Lesnar fight happen. They wanted 50% of the buys for the pay per view if it were to happen. And Dana White just kind of scoffed at it, saying, like, hey, this is going to be the biggest card ever. And you're a nobody, essentially, especially when you're up against Brock Lesnar. It's very easy to
Yeah.
kind of outshine anybody. At that point, nothing happened. So Fedor ended up going to M1 Grand Championship or Grand Prix, and then he ended up losing right after that to Verdum. Then he fought against Henderson and lost. And then after that, I'm pretty sure he fought against Bigfoot Silva and lost. So those were three back-to-back losses against like championship caliber fighters. But just those three quick successions, right from the get-go, just kind of downed his stock and made it to where Dana White was like, "See, I told you so." This guy was a nobody, and it ended up just kind of happening like that.
He has
Currently,
a couple of free fights on YouTube. If you guys want to go check it out,
oh yeah,
he's a monster of a fighter.
and you can catch some of his fights on UFC Fight Pass, so pick that up if you can. Those were back in the Grand Prix days, Pride days, where you can soccer kick people on the ground. So if you do pick that up, definitely watch the Nogueira versus Sap fight and Don Fry against Tamaguchi, I think. Those fights are insane and some of the best if you're looking for old school fights.
Are those also in Grand Prix or Pride?
Those are Pride.
Okay,
So yeah.
so
So
those
Pride
two
was
are other organizations
correct.
that are not the UFC, but on a similar caliber in other
Well,
places.
the UFC ate Pride.
Yeah, they bought them out.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
UFC,
But they were at one point separate things.
Okay.
The UFC has bought out multiple organizations.
Yeah, so they had bought out Strikeforce, they had bought out
It's
WEC.
pretty much their monopoly once they.
Yeah, they're just so big now that it's
Yeah.
easy to just be like, oh, we'll buy you out. You have pretty good fighters. We'll just buy your company.
So
Not
who's
just a fight.
left? Like Bellator and
So it's UFC, Bellator, Ryzen, and one championship for the big ones.
Oh,
Other
One
than that, it's just
championship
kind of
is like Thailand over there.
yeah.
And then I don't know where.
Ryzen is more Japan, but it kind of travels all over the place. And Bellator is like the main kind of competition against the UFC, even though a lot of people
It's not
view
even
it as.
close.
I mean, if you look at Gegard Mousasi, I got him winning against a lot of people in the UFC.
So is that the organization or is that the fighter?
What?
What I'm saying is,
is it
the organization is nowhere close to UFC, the organization.
I don't know though, but because once UFC got rid of Cyborg's in Bellator now winning too.
Yeah,
Right,
she's
but-
the current women's champion there.
Yeah.
And their division is a lot better than the UFC's featherweight division by a landslide. They have actual fighters and a top 15 list where if you look on the UFC roster right now, you only see Amanda Nunes as the champ, and they don't even mention any of the other fighters, which I think it maxes out.
So
at
how come UFC isn't trying to, you know, bring them over or try and take them away from Bellator?
I don't know. They have the capacity.
They have the money.
And they want Amanda Nunes to defend both belts.
Yeah.
So it's just like, why aren't you putting a little bit of money in to kind of garner this attention for something that clearly has a market for it? It's just one of those things where like this falls into place where like Dana White is doing some things that maybe aren't garnering enough money.
Once DC becomes president of the organization,
Think it's gonna all change?
I think it's gonna blow up even bigger just because, all right, people see Dana White and they're like, all right, he's the president, but like, who is he? Everyone who's in the organization knows who DC is because of where he came from. Do you know Dana White because of where he came from?
I mean, the UFC. He's been the UFC space ever since I remember it, but that's right. I don't know.
I remember seeing really who Dana White was from that Tito versus
Chuck Liddell
documentary, and to see him like even just grow physically as a man on his way up the ladder in the UFC. What if he took a step down and he started fighting?
No, that'd be great.
That would be incredible.
Well, that's where like so the thing that Nina was mentioning was the ESPN 30 for 30 Chuck versus Tito, and you can find that on ESPN Plus. Pick it up, $5 a month. There'll be a cheapskate. But as that was happening, so Tito and Dana had kind of this rivalry going just because they didn't like each other, but Tito was just like, "Hey, I'll box you in like a ring for 5 rounds or a 1 round 5 minutes," and Dana White was all for it, but Tito never showed up. So, I mean, I'm not knocking Tito. I'm not knocking. Sorry, Dana White. Just because he's around all these high caliber fighters, there's not something that he didn't pick up here, didn't pick up there.
No. I think you misunderstood where I was coming at for that. All right. So the reason why I'm coming after that is because people tend to have a lot more respect for people that they know the background of. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. DC is gonna have a lot more respect of. All right.
He's gonna be a fighter's fighter. Like
he's gonna be reaching out and inspiring more people than Dana White was able to. Just because DC was like, "Hey, I'm the president of the UFC. You want to know why? Go watch these." And it's like, so I think he's gonna be able to reach out to a lot more fighters, including female fighters, because of his wrestling organizations. Because of the wrestling organizations, his wrestling tournaments that he takes children to and stuff like that. So I think his outreach is going to be a whole lot more, which is going to do a whole lot more for the organization, which is going to do essentially better than what Dana White did because he's going to bring in more women. I think DC is going to fix the women's divisions.
That's fair.
For the UFC events, we have for May 9th, we have Ferguson versus Gaethje for the main event, Cejudo versus Crew for the co-main event, Nunes versus Spencer, Ngannou versus Rosenstrike, and Stephens versus Katner.
Cater. Calvin Cater.
Yeah. And then Pettis versus Cerrone. Those were a lot of names that we threw out. So if you really want to catch some good fights, the best ones to catch would be Ferguson versus Gaethje, Cejudo versus Cruz, and then Pettis versus Cerrone. Those are my top 3.
I think the Amanda Nunes fight versus Felicia Spencer is gonna shock us a little bit. I think from Amanda's last fight, you saw a real weakness on the floor. Like she can take you down and kind of manhandle you, but when she gets on the floor, she's still a little green on that end. Where Felicia Spencer's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so that's where I can kind of see it. If she takes her down or if she gets down on the ground, it can kind of change it up. And you saw Felicia Spencer's heart against Chris Cyborg. She
Her
Chris,
chin, her
yeah,
chin.
her
I
chin
remember
is out
that
of the
fight.
world.
I remember that fight.
That's where I'm
Okay.
just like, everybody's kind of doubting, just like Amanda Nunes. This is how we all felt between Chris Cyborg and Amanda Nunes going in the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thought Amanda Nunes was gonna win. And what
Mm-mm.
happened? She knocked her out.
Yeah.
That's where, like, you got to take these different. It's not the same fighter all the time, and it's not like people can't learn different things.
And I think she's been trying to train more on the ground, and that's where she was using it a lot more. And that's where she didn't knock out her last fight. So you see that she's practicing, but that practice needs to have sped up real quick if you're going against a black belt.
And I think it's hard for the women's division. We've been talking about it during this podcast, but just to put it in perspective for you guys, Spencer has only 3 fights in the UFC, and she's fighting for the championship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She only has her last 3 fights were Anderson, Cyborg, which she lost, and then I can't read my handwriting, but Fairm,
I think
Fairm.
it was like farm or something. But that's how you know that there's not that many fighters in that division. There's not that much experience. There's a lot less of just going around and actually gaining experience just because you only have the 2 or 3 goes and then you're into a championship fight if you happen to win 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Or just one because she came off of a loss. And then she's coming off a win and she's getting an immediate title shot.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess losing Chris Cyborg is kind of understandable. I would lose to Chris Cyborg.
Yeah.
So
that's where, like,
that.
she's the scariest woman ever.
Cyborg is a scary woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see why you like that fight. I'm really excited for Cejudo and Cruz, as well as Souza and Hall, Uriah Hall.
I honestly don't. That's for the card. I think that's going to be the closest fight on the card. I think that one can go either way. It all just kind of depends on how much training they've been doing under this quarantine thing. But that one, I don't know. That one, I'm so excited for that one.
I do. One fighter I do want to talk about. I'm gonna be a little bit of a hater here. Is Jeremy Stevens. I do not understand why he's still in the UFC. For example, let me throw out Ferguson, 15-1. Cejudo 9-2. Nunes 15-2. Spencer 8-1. I just thrown out a couple numbers. Those are their records. Stevens 5-7. There is no other fighter in the UFC at this stage, at this level of the UFC, that has a losing record. He's lost his last 3 fights and then had 1 no contest. So a total of 4 fights.
But that's where.
Why is he still here?
But you gotta look at who he's fighting now. He fought against Yair Rodriguez.
Not a championship contender.
No, he was on the line, and he still is. There's just a lot of people up ahead. It's what Yair's like 6, so he lost against him. He had the no contest against him because Yair swiped his eye like
I'll give you that.
13 or 30 seconds into the fight.
That was nasty.
And everybody that he has been fighting, they're top contenders. I mean, he knocked out Josh Emmett, right?
Yeah, he did.
So it's one of those things where it's just like Josh Emmett was not a fucking cakewalk. There's a lot of the fighters. It's just like Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt left the UFC with a 50-50 record. But look at the motherfucker, like, he was going against Junior Dos Santos. He was going against Bigfoot Silva. He was going against the best of the best. And I think the reason why he doesn't get cut also, even though he keeps on losing and losing, is because he's just like, he's a crazy brawler. And that's what brings people to fights. Like, I mean, as shitty as it is to say, nobody really wants to watch a jiu-jitsu match.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as soon as just look at it on YouTube versus the last fight in a UFC fight versus a jiu-jitsu match, you're looking at like tenfold what you're looking at for a jiu-jitsu match. So that's where his style is fan-friendly. Like, you want to see somebody get knocked out or get knocked out. And that's what garners him that kind of attention to stay on the UFC roster.
But 5 and I don't.
I mean, I get it.
5-7. That's too. I think one or two more losses. I think the UFC is gonna have to do something.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So we'll see. We'll see what
I
happens.
mean, he's fighting against an unranked dude,
Yeah,
so that shows
I
you.
don't know. I looked up this guy on the internet. His opponent. He's Everybody else has official stats on the ESPN UFC page. I could not find this guy's official stats.
Calvin Cater's gonna be a good fight. I think that's gonna
So
be a really good fight. I'm not as excited for it as the other fights on the card. Um, but yeah, I think it's gonna be a good fight. But that's where I kind of have to come into defense for Jeremy Stevens just because he is going against like top tier dudes and just his style. It's not boring. You want to see it. So, but the other one that I really kind of wanted to go into was the Cerrone versus Pettis fight.
Yeah, I'm shocked Cowboys fighting again so soon. So we
don't
just
be.
saw him knocked out by Conor McGregor. And I think the world remembers that shoulder
Yeah,
that took him out. And so I'm
the shoulder
so
strike that was
surprised.
heard around the world.
Heard around the dang world. So to see him come back, I like Cowboy is such a super, like, everyone is such a fan of Cowboy, myself included. It's going to be great to see him back out there, but also I'm like worried for him. Like, I need him to maybe take a minor pause.
If someone in the UFC is gonna kill someone, uh, Donald Cerrone has been probably rocked the most because he has the most fights than anybody else in the UFC.
Yeah.
So he's probably been. You can safe say it's probably been rocked the most out of everybody else.
Oh yeah, and I
So
mean, if we're talking about John Jones having CTE, Donald Cerrone definitely has CTE. That's where I love watching Donald Cerrone fight, and it's not a hate on him. It's just I want to see him fight and win. Where now I see his body slowly kind of giving way and not being as
Slowing
sharp,
down.
and I want him to like take like maybe 3 fights a year instead of the 5. You don't need to come off of a loss in January and fight again in April or May, I guess now. It's just like maybe just take a moment here or there. Take a breather. You don't need to be constantly rushing it all the time.
but he's leaving a legacy.
That's
He
true,
is leaving
but
a
I mean,
legacy.
then the legacy gets besmirched because he keeps on losing. Like if he goes out, if he fights another like 2 or 3 times and they're all losses,
He'd probably be
then
done. He'll probably
yeah.
yeah.
And he's like, I'm gonna keep on fighting until the
Yeah,
doctors
he
tell me I
talks
can't.
about it like it's not his profession, just his truest passion. And so, because we all love Cowboy so much, we don't want to see that legacy to be diluted with these last
Yeah.
several fights.
Yeah.
Just to give people kind of idea how many fights he's had over. He's had about 50 fights. Uh, in the UFC, in his career, and then roughly like 30 of them have been. I mean, I'm sorry, 35 to 40 of them have been in the UFC, I believe.
Something like that because he has the most wins and the most um fight of the night bonuses and stuff like that. So I mean, he's a workhorse and he's been around. It's just one of those things where you just gotta kind of slow it down just a little bit.
And to put it into perspective, most fighters fight once or twice a year, and he's
He fights about 5.
fighting
I mean, yeah,
five.
he's fine. Yeah, so people want to say like, yeah, I want to have a season like Connor. I want to fight, 3 times this year, my first, second, and third fight, and even that is just like that's on the higher end.
Because training camps, as you said in beginning of the podcast, training camps are 2 to 3 months of your life.
Yeah,
2,
just
3,
for
4.
the announcement of
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
fight.
yeah.
So then to go into it and be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and get another fight in when you haven't even had time to recover from your last one,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like you're doing too much. Why?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. It's just I don't know. It's one of those kind of backhanded things where you want it, but you also want the best. And as much as I want to see Cowboy fight like 15 fights in a year, it's just like obviously you can't. So
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm calling Ferguson to win. I'm calling Cejudo to win. I'm calling Nunes to win. Ngannou. I don't know about Stevens, and I'm calling for Pettis to win.
I'm on board with Pettis. I think Stevens will win. I have Ngannou winning as well. I'm gonna go with the dark horse with the Felicia Spencer versus Amanda Nunez. I think Felicia Spencer will win.
You told me you would never doubt Nunes after that cyborg fight.
I'm not doubting her. I just
You're.
no, I'm not.
Are you pulling for her?
No,
All right then.
I'm not doubting
You're
her.
doubting her.
No, she's fucking crazy. I just think she's gonna get caught.
What about Cejudo and Cruz?
I got Cejudo. I think.
You think Cruz is done?
I don't think Cruz is done. I wish he would have had just one more fight before going into a fight with Henry Cejudo.
I think Cejudo's gonna win, but as much as I like Cejudo, I want Cruz to win. I've been watching Cruz's fight and his reign, and just hearing him as a broadcaster and stuff.
Yeah.
I really like.
And he's one of the best defensive fighters of all time. I mean, look at how many times he's been hit throughout his career. It's very far and few in between, and he is always constantly in a 25-minute fight. So
his only two losses was at his very first loss and his very last loss.
Yeah,
his very first loss was Faber, and then his very last loss was Cody Garbrandt.
Cody Garbrandt, yeah. As far as the main event, so we had put a poll out on our Instagram page, and overwhelmingly everybody voted for Tony to win, except for one person, your sister. But other than that, everybody was kind of unanimous saying that Tony was gonna win that.
I feel bad for him because, like,
yeah, it's just like I would have loved Gaethje to go against Conor. That way, he at least gets one win and then fights the winner of Tony versus Khabib. Because now it's just like if you lose, then what?
Yeah.
Conor's not gonna want to fight you on a loss. Because then that's two fighters back to back that he's fighting that.
But at least Gaethje has more time to train now, so
that's true. So we'll see. But then if Tony loses, my heart breaks because I want to see Tony versus Khabib.
I think I like Tony, but I don't think I like him as much as I like Gaethje. I really like Tony, but there's something about
Tony.
him.
Come on the show so you can show Juan what you're about.
Yeah,
and,
please.
Change his mind.
Just show me that you're a G.
Justin Gaethje, come on the show as well. We want to tell you that you're being reckless when you're saying you're not. But
there's someone else I forgot. Anyways, that Luque fight. I'm stupid excited for that. Luque, the more I've seen him fight, the more I become a fan.
the Nico Price versus Luque. Yeah, that's gonna be dope.
Since I became a fan of his since his Perry fight.
That's fair.
And then after his Perry fight, I've been watching him. So.
Speaking of Instagram, sorry guys, that's our dog Nelly. Nelly, come on the show.
Nelly is on the show.
So speaking of Instagram, you had also put up a bunch of different stuff, and we were getting a lot of hits back and just comments or questions too. And someone had asked what our dream jobs would be. What would you guys say?
I don't really have a passion for anything specifically. I do love animals, and like if I could work with animals like all day, that'd be dope. Cool. Which I could. Realistically, that's the thing. But if I was thinking about a dream job, about something that was a little bit more unrealistic, that would be harder to get to, Joe Rogan has the perfect job. UFC and following like passions. Since I followed UFC, it's been really interesting just being able to talk about it. So Joe Rogan being able to broadcast it, being a broadcaster for UFC, and then he probably gets paid for his podcast as well, even though he doesn't put any like advertisements on there or anything.
Oh yeah,
but he probably gets paid for that too. So
8.3 million followers.
So he's getting paid to watch fights. He's getting paid to talk about them, and then he's getting paid to pretty much have podcasts with his stupid friends and all these smart scientists and stuff. And
Joe Rogan, come on the show. Show us how to be you.
Yes.
Hang out with us. Let us come on your show.
I'll roll you a joint. Like,
babe, what would your dream job be?
I think my dream job would be something that I've done in the past, but just as contract work. Um, I would like to do freelance film producing, so the pre-production and point
That'd be really dope.
person.
Yeah, that'd be really dope.
Yeah, that'd be my dream job.
I think for me, honestly, just an MMA journalist. If I can have like the kind of connections that people would have with the fighters and management and the inner workings of the UFC, and I can really give it a go, that would be dope. Obviously, I'm not gonna go to journalist school because fuck that. Ariel Helwani come on the show,
Ariel,
but
come
it's
on,
just
show.
one of those things where even if I was a commentator, just that would be amazing. Just to see a fight live and get paid. I
Joe
mean, I would
Rogan
just
has
do
the
it.
perfect job.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I think on that note, one final thing that we wanted to mention before we signed off. Um, Isaiah Chapman from Bellator, he was a bantamweight, was shot dead outside of his Ohio home. Um, they have caught the suspect and he's been arrested, and he left behind two daughters and a son, and we just wanted to give a quick shout out and prayer and thoughts for the family. um, with that, hit us up on our Instagram page at no.name.mma. um,
Even if it's not MMA related, if you guys just have questions for us, we'll answer them. It doesn't matter. If you guys do have MMA questions or comments, anything that you want us to look up, feel free. We'll take the time to read your emails, and we'll also take the time to look up the information that you asked for us.
Yeah, our email is no name MMA show@gmail.com.
all right, everybody have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.